So famous secular thinkers like Richard Dawkins and, Sam Harris.
Right, the new atheists.
Yeah, exactly. They have argued for years that the ultimate intellectual liberation is basically having freedom from religion.
Just walking away from it entirely.
Right. You just step outside of that entire framework, wash your hands of it, and you move on. But what if they are fundamentally wrong about that?
And we should clarify, wrong not necessarily about whether a specific God exists, right?
Oh, for sure. Not about the existence of God, but about the basic mechanics of just being human. Like, what if humans can literally never have freedom from religion?
It's a huge claim.
Yeah.
And we are unpacking a really fascinating paper today that makes exactly that bold claim.
It's such a good one.
Yeah, it's a 2017 paper by Tennyson Samraj. He presented this at the Asia-Pacific Conference on Multidisciplinary Research, and it's titled Philosophy and Religion: Importance of Philosophy of Religion.
Rolls right off the tongue.
Right, it's a very academic title. But the mission of our deep dive today is to explore why, according to this author, we just simply cannot escape religion.
Like it's hardwired.
Exactly. We are going to look at how philosophy acts as this necessary bridge to understanding belief, and why the questions we ask might actually be far more important than the answers we ultimately find.
And I want to set the tone right out of the gate here because I know this is a heavy topic. Regardless of your personal beliefs out there, whether you are devoutly religious or fiercely atheist or, somewhere completely in the middle.
Which is most people, probably.
Yeah, probably. But this deep dive is not about proving who is scientifically right or wrong. We are here strictly as impartial observers today.
Just looking at the text.
Exactly, just unpacking the source material to figure out why human beings seem completely wired to grapple with these massive, inescapable concepts in the first place. So let's unpack this.
Let's do it.
Why exactly does the author argue that freedom from religion is, structurally impossible?
Well, it really comes down to the types of questions that human beings are uniquely capable of asking. The paper argues that you can absolutely advocate for freedom of religion.
Right, freedom of religion, meaning I can choose to be a Buddhist or a Christian or nothing at all.
Exactly. You can choose what you believe or choose not to subscribe to a specific dogma, but you cannot have freedom from the concept itself.
Because the concept is just baked into us.
Basically, yeah. Because religion, at its core, is just an organized attempt to answer inescapable human questions. Samraj actually quotes the philosopher Gottfried Leibniz here.
Oh, Leibniz. Okay.
Yeah, he posed what might be the ultimate question, which is, why is there something rather than nothing?
Wow. Yeah, that is the big one, isn't it?
It really is.
It's the question you eventually hit if you keep asking why, like a toddler. You just keep going until you hit the very bottom of the universe.
Right, and because humans possess cognizance and intentionality, we're always going to bump into that exact question. We can't turn off our awareness of our own existence.
Right, we can't unknow that we are here.
Exactly. So philosophy's job is to look at a question like that and determine if it's relevant to the human condition.
Okay, so philosophy vets the question.
Yes, and then religion's job is to step in and claim that specific answers to that question are true.
I see.
Because human beings will always face these existential questions, the structural framework of religion, which is, again, the organized attempt to answer them, is always going to exist in some form.
I think the best way to make this click for you guys listening is to think about the weather.
Oh, I like this.
Yeah, so saying you want freedom from religion is like claiming you want freedom from weather. Now, you might absolutely hate the rain,
Sure.
and you have total freedom to choose which umbrella you want to buy, or you can choose to just stand there in the rain and get totally soaked.
Right, which is freedom of religion.
Exactly, that is freedom of religion. But you can't just opt out of the sky existing. You can't decree that the atmosphere no longer applies to you.
That's a great way to put it.
The existential questions, the whole why is there something rather than nothing, that is the weather. It is going to rain down on you regardless of whether you are standing in a church or standing in a laboratory.
The weather is a given. And since we cannot escape the weather of these existential questions, the next logical step is figuring out how we respond to them.
How we deal with the rain.
Yeah.
Hmm.
And that brings us to the awareness of our own existence and the very active choice we make to keep living.
Which is where the source material brings in Albert Camus, right?
Yes.
Which takes the conversation into this whole concept of the absurdity of life.
And the paper points out a pretty staggering reality here.
Mm-hmm.
We have absolutely no idea how insentient, lifeless matter suddenly became sentient.
It's wild to think about.
It really is. You have a universe full of rocks, gas, empty space,
Yeah.
and somehow matter organized itself in a way that allows it to look around and realize it exists.
It's a complete mystery.
Total mystery. But we know with absolute certainty that we are sentient. So Camus famously argued that there is really only one truly serious philosophical problem, and that is suicide.
Right. It's the ultimate question of whether life is worth living or not.
Exactly.
Because the moment you realize you are alive and you don't automatically know why you're alive, you are immediately forced to make a choice whether to continue.
Right. The default is no longer just existing.
The default becomes a choice. Every day you wake up, you are choosing to stay.
But the paper points out a really crucial nuance in Camus' thinking. Committing suicide does not actually solve the absurdity of life.
Oh, interesting. How so?
Well, it doesn't answer the question of why we are here. It just ends your personal experience of the absurdity.
Oh, I get it. It's like turning off a movie because you don't understand the plot. The plot is still confusing, you're just not watching it anymore.
Exactly. Life remains fundamentally absurd if we choose to live it. But we do not know why we are choosing to live it. Samraj argues that religion is fundamentally about choosing to live and having a defined why.
Having a reason.
Right. Most people don't just live out of a biological fear of death. They live because they have found a reason to endure the absurdity.
But hold on, let me push back on that a little bit for the listeners.
Sure, go ahead.
Do you actually have to have a concept of God to know why you choose to live? I mean, what about secular humanists who find deep, profound meaning just in their day-to-day lives without any kind of supernatural framework?
That's a totally fair question, and the paper actually anticipates this.
Yeah.
It explicitly acknowledges humanists and existentialists.
Yeah.
Like Jean-Paul Sartre.
Okay, good.
Yeah, the author notes that humanists argue we can live a perfectly authentic, meaningful life independent of God. They find their meaning, as the paper beautifully puts it, between the womb and the tomb.
Oh, that's a great phrase. Between the womb and the tomb.
It is. Theists, on the other hand, argue for a meaning that extends beyond the existential limits of birth and death. So a meaning beyond this planet.
So they arrive at totally different conclusions, obviously. The humanist looks at the span of a human life and says, this is enough. This is enough to create meaning. While the theist says, no, the meaning has to be anchored to something eternal.
Right. And here's the synthesis the paper makes. They are both engaging in the exact same fundamental, inescapable human quest.
To find a why.
Exactly. They are both trying to remove the absurdity of life by defining their why.
Yeah.
The mechanic of assigning meaning is identical, even if the object of that meaning is different.
So going back to the weather thing, both the atheist humanist and the devout theist are standing in the weather, holding up their respective umbrellas and saying, this is how I choose to deal with the rain.
That is exactly right.
Okay, so if finding a why so often leads people to religion, how does philosophy handle the logical mechanics of a creator? Like, we're moving from the human search for meaning into something much more structural now.
Right, the nuts and bolts. To understand that, we have to go back to Leibniz and the concept of the uncaused cause.
The uncaused cause.
Yeah, it is a foundational concept in the philosophy of religion. The logic is based entirely on causality. Anything that has a beginning must have a cause. It is contingent on something else.
Like dominoes.
Exactly like dominoes. If you knock over a domino, it fell because the domino behind it hit it. Therefore, if you trace the universe all the way back, any causal explanation must eventually lead to something that is uncaused.
Something that didn't have a domino behind it.
Right, it must be non-contingent.
Because otherwise, you run into the infinite regression problem. You just have an endless line of dominoes falling backward forever, which, well, it doesn't logically explain how the falling started in the first place.
Exactly, there has to be a prime mover.
A prime mover.
Yes. So philosophy helps establish the logical necessity of this uncaused cause. But the paper makes an incredibly crucial distinction here, and it's honestly one of the most vital takeaways from the text.
Okay, what's the distinction?
According to Samraj, God is definable, but God is not identifiable.
Okay, let's slow down on that because that is a pretty dense philosophical distinction. Definable versus identifiable.
Right. So the paper uses the example of gold to separate these two concepts.
But the metal.
Yeah, the metal.
Huh?
Gold is both definable and identifiable. It is definable because we know its atomic number, its properties, its melting point.
Right, we have the specs.
Exactly. And it is identifiable because if I hand you a gold coin, you can test it, you can hold it, and confirm its identity as gold in the physical world.
Got it.
God, according to this philosophical framework, is definable. We can logically define the concept as the uncaused cause, the non-contingent reality required to start the dominoes.
But we cannot identify it.
Right. ontological and metaphysical necessity, meaning the logical need for a creator to exist just to make the math of the universe work, that cannot provide an identity. From the information we have, a specific identity has not been revealed in a way we can empirically test.
Okay, I think I have an analogy for this one. It is like having a flawless, mathematically perfect blueprint for a house.
Okay.
That blueprint is the definition. We can look at the angles, the load-bearing walls, the plumbing, and we can define exactly what that house must logically be for it to not collapse.
Right.
But we don't have the physical street address to go knock on the front door. We can define the house perfectly, but we can't identify where it physically is. That lack of a street address is the lack of identification.
That's brilliant.
Yeah.
Yes, you have the structural logic, but not the tangible encounter. And the paper suggests that this massive gap, the gap between what we logically know must be true and what there actually is to know, should act as a formula for humility.
A formula for humility. I really like that, because if you accept that you only have the blueprint and not the address, you can't really claim an absolute monopoly on the truth, can you?
No, you can't. The text states explicitly that no one has a monopoly on religious truth. And this raises an important question. If God is unidentifiable and largely mysterious, then how does a believer actually interact with their religion on a daily basis?
Right, which brings us directly to morality. If you can't identify God in a laboratory, what is the practical, boots-on-the-ground application of belief?
The author provides a standout quote here. He writes that religion is not about what truth is, but about what truth does in the life of the believer.
What truth does?
Yes, the paper claims that the birth of a believer is the birth of an authentic life. It moves the conversation from abstract metaphysics, like the uncaused cause, to tangible moral action.
So religion becomes a lived experience rather than just a solved equation.
Exactly.
But if we are talking about a moral life, we really have to talk about Plato's Euthyphro dilemma. I mean, it's pretty much impossible to talk about the philosophy of religion and morality without hitting this wall.
Oh, absolutely. It is one of the oldest and most stubborn questions in philosophy. It was originally posed by Socrates to a man named Euthyphro. The dilemma is, this is conduct right because God said so, or did God say so because it is right?
Just to break that down for a second for everyone listening, it's a trap.
It's a massive trap.
Yeah, because if conduct is only right because God said so, then morality is completely arbitrary. God could theoretically command us to lie and steal, and lying and stealing would suddenly be morally good.
Right, there's no independent standard.
Exactly. But if we take the other horn of the dilemma, if God says conduct is right because it is inherently right, then morality exists independently of God.
Which is a huge problem for theology.
Right, because it means there is a standard of goodness that is higher than the Creator, which completely challenges the idea of God being the ultimate authority.
The Euthyphro dilemma forces us to ask if morals are pre-established divine prescriptions handed down from above, or if God is just endorsing a universal standard that exists on its own.
But what if we just take God out of the equation entirely? Like, what if morals are just a social contract, like Thomas Hobbes argued?
Right, the secular view.
Yeah, we just collectively agree not to steal from each other so society can function without collapsing into total chaos. It has nothing to do with divine prescriptions or universal truths. It's just, a human survival strategy.
The paper actually tackles that head-on.
Mm-hmm.
The author points out that whether you believe morals are divine prescriptions from a creator or human ascriptions, meaning social contracts we invent to regulate behavior, you are still doing the exact same thing.
Which is what?
You are exercising your moral self.
Ah, okay. So the origin of the rules doesn't change the fact that you are a creature uniquely capable of recognizing and following rules.
Exactly. You are demonstrating that you are a moral being. Religion attempts to define this moral self in the context of the immortal and the divine. The text argues that the best way to define religion is to define the relationship between being good and doing good.
Being good versus doing good.
Yeah, you could do good things without necessarily being a good person at your core. Maybe you're just doing it for the social reward or out of habit. But you cannot truly be a good person without doing good things.
The action is the evidence of the state of being.
Right.
Okay, so if we are making these moral choices, we have to actually be aware of our reality. But awareness isn't just one monolithic thing, right? The paper breaks this down into layers, starting with just the sheer fact that we exist at all.
It does.
I feel like this gives us a really solid framework for how human beings process all this heavy philosophy we've been talking about.
Yeah, the mechanics of awareness. The paper outlines 3 types: ontological, epistemic, and existential awareness.
Okay, let's go through them.
Let's start with ontological awareness. This is our awareness of being versus non-being. It's the awareness that we are alive, awake, and alert.
And the paper makes a wild, mind-bending argument here about abstract realities, doesn't it?
Oh, it really does. The author argues that metaphysical necessity defines God as God in all possible worlds. Why? Because there are abstract realities like universal numbers, the fact that 2 + 2 = 4, or geometrical truths that are true everywhere, in all possible worlds.
Right, math doesn't change.
Right. And the paper posits that these abstract realities require a mind to house them.
Wait, let me make sure I'm following this. Are you saying that because 2 + 2 = 4, whether humans exist or not, that math itself needs a cosmic hard drive to exist on?
A cosmic hard drive, I love that. But yes,
Because if the entire physical universe vanished, no humans, no planets, no atoms, 2 + 2 would still technically equal 4. But where does that truth actually live if there is no physical universe?
that is the exact philosophical argument the paper is making. It draws on a concept sometimes called divine conceptualism.
Divine conceptualism.
Yes, for mathematical truths to remain true eternally, independent of the physical universe, there must be an eternal mind in which they exist as concepts. And the awareness of these universal, non-physical realities falls under ontological awareness.
That is a staggering thought. The idea that math itself requires a cosmic consciousness just to have a place to exist.
It's heavy stuff.
Okay, what is the second layer of awareness?
The second is epistemic awareness. This deals with our awareness of truth and falsity. It's about cognition and how we know things. The paper distinguishes between intentional states using 2 Latin philosophical terms, de dicto and de re.
De dicto and de re.
Right. Essentially distinguishes between knowing about God, which is de dicto, knowing the proposition, the facts, or the definition, and believing in God, which is de re, dealing with the reality of the subject itself.
So it's like the difference between memorizing historical facts for a theology exam versus actually holding a deep personal faith.
Exactly.
I can know all the attributes of a religion perfectly, de dicto, without actually believing in it, de re.
Spot on. And to explain how this epistemic awareness functions physically versus philosophically, the paper uses this fascinating scientific comparison. It looks at the difference between the physical brain and the conscious mind.
Okay, the water analogy, right?
Yeah.
Just like water molecules grouping together creates the visible state of liquidity, firing neurons create a visible brain state we can detect. Like, we can put you in an MRI machine and literally see the electricity in your brain. That visible neural emergence is like liquidity.
But the mind, the conscious self inside your head that is actually making the choices, that is an invisible emergence. The paper compares this conscious self to gravity.
Gravity.
Yeah, you cannot see gravity itself. You can only see the effect it has on mass. Similarly, you cannot physically see the conscious self. You can only see the effect it has on the physical brain in the MRI.
Man, that is so good. The physical brain is the water, yielding the visible property of liquidity. But the mind, the self that decides why to believe in something, is the invisible gravity pulling the levers.
Right.
It is a justified belief decision made by that invisible self, which perfectly sets up the third and final type of awareness, doesn't it?
It does. Existential awareness. This is the awareness of meaning. The existential self recognizes that establishing what truth is ultimately not as important as understanding what truth does.
Going back to that earlier quote.
Exactly. Life is not an imposition. Birth is the imposition. None of us asked to be born.
True.
But once we are here, we ascribe meaning to life in order to live it. The existential awareness is the part of us that takes the blueprint, takes the invisible gravity of our mind, and decides how to walk out into the weather.
We have covered massive ground today.
We really have.
We started with Leibniz and the idea that you can't simply escape the weather of the big questions. Dawkins and Harris might want freedom from religion, but as long as humans have the capacity to ask, why is there something rather than nothing, we are going to be caught in that existential rainstorm.
And we saw how Camus showed us the absurdity of that storm. Choosing to live requires a why, whether you are a humanist finding meaning between the womb and the tomb, or a theist looking beyond this planet to anchor that meaning.
We looked at the infinite regression of dominoes, leading to the blueprint of the uncaused cause, how God might be logically definable, but remains totally unidentifiable in a laboratory, which, demands a massive amount of humility from all of us.
Absolutely.
And finally, we explored how our invisible conscious selves navigate the moral choices of being good and doing good.
It really all comes back to the relationship between philosophy and religion. Philosophy determines if the questions we are asking are relevant. Religion steps in and claims the answers are true.
It's quite a partnership. To leave you with one final, lingering concept drawn directly from the text, just something to mull over as you go about your day.
It's a great quote.
It really is. The paper states very simply that answers without questions are irrelevant. So regardless of your worldview, whether you are deeply religious or completely secular, look at your own life. What deeply held answers are you currently carrying around for which you have completely forgotten the original question?